If weight loss was simply about willpower alone, then obesity wouldn't be on the rise. Even if we have access to things like GLP-1s and drugs which enhance the rate of weight loss, after a year, people regain 2/3 of that weight. So it is not simply just a chemical and environmental change. It's to do with a lot of different mechanisms, which involve emotional stresses, psychological states, and your environment as well. All of these combined will influence how quickly you can lose weight and some of the reasons why you might be struggling. So today I'm going to be diving into if you're someone who struggles with weight loss and experiences quite intense cravings, some of the things that might be causing it, and in my next video I'm going to be giving you some strategies as to how you can start to manage them and hopefully lead to greater success in your weight loss journey. So there is a connection between obesity and addiction because both of these encompass the use of the dopamine pathway. Now, dopamine is something that we naturally produce, which is a neurotransmitter and chemical, which makes us feel good or elated, and our brain is rewarding us for doing certain activities. Now, in the past, this was used as a survival mechanism. So we would produce dopamine when we ate, so that would prevent us from starving. When we have sex, because that would encourage procreation and the advancement of the species, and within things like physical exertional exercise, because being physically fit gave you an advantage when it came to hunting, running away from predators, and just being able to survive better. So naturally, we are meant to produce dopamine. What does happen though is certain substances like drugs and hyperpalatable foods create high dopamine spikes. In the case of substances like drugs and alcohol, we have artificial dopamine spikes, and they work on certain chemical pathways and we get either a high or an elation from it. And what creates that addictiveness is a response to either positive or negative reinforcement. So the negative reinforcement would be to do with things like if you are feeling anxious or depressed or low and your dopamine is low, doing something that makes you feel better could be a way of suppressing those negative thoughts or behaviors. Or in the case of drug use, it could be chasing a certain high or feeling of euphoria, which is why you repeat that behavior, because your brain is signaling that you want to feel good. And that's where it comes in with hyperpalatable foods as well. So this is what I'm talking about: high sugar or high fat and high calorie foods, which are designed to make you crave them more, or you will crave them more because of how they taste. You get such a big dopamine spike from it. And we see this particularly in people who struggle with bingeing disorders, that if they are struggling with certain emotional stresses, a coping mechanism or a way that they can deal with some of those negative thoughts and behaviors is through food. And they will get this huge dopamine spike from eating high volumes of food in a short sitting, but afterwards may feel things like guilt, shame that they were trying to suppress. So it becomes a nasty cycle. In obese populations as well, we don't typically see the dopamine spike, but with the food alone, they will get less satiety from eating the food because they expose themselves to it on a regular basis. Now, hyperpalatable foods are designed to make you eat more. So I'm going to use an example of potatoes. If I just gave you a bowl of boiled potatoes, there would probably be a point without seasoning or anything. So again, it will taste pretty plain. You'll get to a point where you'll feel full and you'll be like, yep, I can stop there. I'm good. And there's probably going to be some left in the bowl. But if I gave you the same quantity of French fries or chips or more, you would be able to probably eat all of them, if not go for a second serving, because your ability to regulate your appetite and your sensitivity to leptin, the satiety hormone, which signals that you're full, is going to be dysregulated. So as a result, you will eat a higher quantity, even if you're not intending to, because your brain is rewarding you by saying, yeah, this is great. Because from a survival perspective as well, if we are consuming more calories, that's going to increase our likelihood of being able to survive, even if our physical activity doesn't meet the needs of our calorie requirements or it goes above it. This is also why over time, similar to if you have an alcohol addiction, that your tolerance increases over time, your ability to tolerate and increase your intake of hyperpalatable foods also increases. Because to feel the same level of satiation, you will need more to feel full because of the fact that your leptin levels are dysregulated and they are less sensitive. So in the case of diabetes, we want you to be sensitive to blood glucose rise because if insulin can respond to it, it pulls the glucose into your muscles and cells and brings your blood glucose down. If that is dysregulated in the case of type 2 diabetes, where people don't respond well to insulin, then they can produce high amounts, but the blood glucose doesn't come down. Similar to how you can manage food intakes and calorie intakes, your ability to stop eating or to feel full is going to be impacted as a result. In the case of addiction as well, cravings play a huge role in behaviors. We can compare a craving in people who are addicted to substances to having a spot or a bite that is itching all the time and you're trying to suppress that, which was what Anna Lemke spoke about in terms of how you can compare and almost imagine it. And I thought that was a brilliant analogy, so I'm going to reuse it here. But it's the same with food cravings, that if you're having sugar regularly, even if it's a small amount and it's hyperpalatable foods, you are going to be more likely to want to crave it or eat it because you are exposing yourself to it regularly. And over time, when that goes down, if you're also dieting as well and your appetite regulation is off, as well as the fact that you are sort of feeling hungrier as well because your ghrelin levels increase, which means that you have more appetite stimulating hormone. If you're still having sugar in your diet, even if it fits into your macros, it's going to make the cravings feel worse or stronger, because even if you have the smallest amount and you do it regularly and your other meals are fine, it's just going to make you feel worse. And aggressive diets never work as well, because if calories are still low but you're not looking at what those calories are accounting for, then the way that you feel is going to be subjectively worse. And ultimately, if the cravings get so intense, it's going to cause you to relapse or revert to old eating behaviors. And that's where we're going to go into in the next part of the emotional impact that this can have. So if we know hyperpalatable foods are not essentially amazing for us when it comes to weight loss, then why do we struggle so much with eating them regularly? And there are a few reasons I can think of for that. The first one is the fact that food is in abundance. We can access food pretty much anytime, any place, and as much as we want. There's no one in the supermarket telling us you can't buy a 10-pack of biscuits because you're only one person, and that's for 10 people. And it's cheaper, it's accessible. You can access things at any time of the day. If you come home from work and you've had a really long day, are you going to think more about cooking a meal that's healthier, or are you just going to go on your phone, click on Deliveroo and order what's going to come sooner and is going to satisfy your cravings that you're having? You're probably going to go for the second option because it's more convenient and it's accessible. And we can typically do this at any time of the day now, so there's no limitation or restriction like we would previously have, where there was either a limitation in either availability. So for example, when people went through periods of famine or hunter-gatherers, you would have less abundance. You would typically have to go through periods of not eating. But when you live in a comfortable home, the shops are within a 5-minute walking distance, or you don't even have to leave your house if you want to get food, it makes it a lot easier to be able to buy things. And when it comes to dealing with cravings and things that we desire, it's much easier to just get access to them. So convenience and accessibility are a huge one. And the fact that historically we had very different environments, which meant that the cues that we had or our ability to access things were limited and restricted as a result. Even if we want to say like, no, I'm just going to resist it and use as much willpower as we want, there is no off switch, and our ability to say no to things is going to be a lot harder. Another thing we need to factor in when it comes to both environmental and emotions is stress. Now, stress acts on pretty much every system in the body. It increases inflammation, reduces your ability to adapt to certain situations if it is chronic and we do not manage it. Now, stress itself is not fundamentally bad for you, but the fact that we have constant stresses and constant stimulants that keep us up and in this high arousal state all the time will mean that when we come out of periods of stress, or we get that drop once the stressor comes down, that's when cravings can settle in, and this feeling of panic and overwhelming emotions can encourage us to want to eat more. Because what happens is stress acts on the HPA axis. That is the feedback mechanism from the brain, or the hypothalamus, which is our master regulating gland. It acts on the pituitary and signals it to release hormones from the adrenal glands, which are both adrenaline and cortisol. They are our fight or flight hormones, which are responsible for responding to danger, and this is, again, a survival mechanism. That once we go through a period of stress, we have this high arousal state, which allows us to react to danger. It helps us to be able to flee or fight, so it suppresses certain pain receptors. But when that wears off, or the stress subsides, that's when we start to see this drop in glucose, our feelings of hunger become elevated, our ability to regulate appetite is lower because your body is reacting to that stressor. But if we're chronically stressed, that is pretty much up and elevated all the time. So our ability to make decisions is lower, we are feeling more inflamed, it's harder to lose weight because our body composition changes as a result. And we typically see in women, they have stronger cravings for sugar. So one study looked at this where they exposed women to acute stressors, and 77% of them had experienced sugar cravings after that bout of stress, which shows that our emotional state does affect our hormones and our appetite as well, and the types of foods that we are going to lean towards when we go through periods of stress. So that is another huge one, that if we are going through periods of emotional distress and we are looking for something to help suppress those feelings or to deal with them as a coping mechanism, having food that increases your dopamine and immediately gives you that release is going to be a lot more appealing than just going for a very boring meal that you've cooked, which is not well seasoned or prepared. So that's where it kind of comes in with the stress role within all of this. It's a combination of the emotional and the physiological elements that work together with your environment, and that impacts our ability to desire and crave food. So we know about the craving mechanisms and the fact that food is in abundance. So why is it that we turn to food? It's more that we use it as a coping mechanism, and typically think about it as an avoidance strategy, because we know that eating past the point of fullness or binging will make us feel physically sick or bad, but we do it anyway because of the fact that at the time it alleviates some of the pain that we're feeling. It's much harder to sit with your feelings and thoughts and go through those waves of discomfort and sadness than to just eat your feelings and just deal with it later, or just not deal with it at all. So an example I can use here is when I was competing. When I finished my bodybuilding show, I didn't have a goal to look towards anymore, and I was already feeling emotionally dysregulated. My appetite was completely off because of the fact that I had been dieting for over 20 weeks. But that sense of loss of identity and unable to deal with life itself meant that I could sort of deal with that by overeating and binging. And it wasn't necessarily in public because you have the elements of shame and guilt associated with it, but it would be in the quiet moments where no one was downstairs and I could just quietly eat in the corner and people wouldn't notice, or I would hide the food or hide the evidence. And it's these sort of behaviors that we think, oh, I can look back and reflect on it and think now that I deal with things very differently, but that discomfort itself is sometimes so overwhelming and difficult for people to deal with that food is the easiest resource of comfort and mechanisms to cope that don't have to address the problem or involve other people, which is why I think, in a way, if you are struggling with binge eating disorders or you are struggling to lose weight and you're finding yourself yo-yoing back and forth by over-consuming and then like under-eating and going through these cycles where you physically feel awful, there are certain emotional things that you probably have to deal with, and that could be anywhere from feeling lonely and not having a partner to just having a negative relationship with yourself and thinking that you're not worth certain things, or if something is shifting in your life, like you're going through a transition with work or something that's really traumatic, then food tends to typically be what people use to deal with it. So if you are someone who is going through something tough and you're also dieting and not allowing yourself the time to recover and heal, then unfortunately this is not going to get any better unless you either seek help or guidance from someone else or look at your support network overall. There are so many factors that relate into this as both emotional, physiological, and environmental. So in the next episode, if you are someone who struggles with extreme cravings or struggling with weight loss in general and are feeling a little bit lost, then my next video will definitely help you with understanding what you need to do now or give you some strategies and tools that can help you to work on that weight loss, as well as being able to deal with some of the emotional stress that you might be encompassing. So I hope this helped, and if you have any questions or would like any further advice on this topic, please shoot me a message or drop something in the comments below, and I will try and look into that in my next video. So have a great one, and I'll see you in the next one.